Okay, so first of all, let me just say hello to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very, very, very excited, and really, we've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So I'm very, very happy that you're all here with us today. So this is another episode in our speaker series on leading philanthropy and nonprofit voices. And I just wanted to remind everybody again that this series was created sometime last year, I think May of last year. My team and I at AFF really had wanted to create a space where we could exchange ideas and share some of the promising developments on some of the inspiring models that are being advanced by the region's philanthropic and nonprofit sector. And we feel like, by spotlighting these leading voices and these sector champions, really our ultimate goal is to spread good practice, and also to understand a little bit better what we can do differently, maybe how we can improve our own organizations, our own giving, and how as a community we can make greater impact. So today's conversation, we'll be tackling the issues of risk-taking and trust-based grant-making practices. We talk a lot in the sector about trust-based philanthropy. What does that mean? And so our guest speaker today, I'm delighted to present Her Royal Highness Princess Lamia bint Majed AlSaud. Her Royal Highness will be sharing her insights on how embracing risk and trust-based giving practices can really drive more impact and can inspire other sector actors to follow suit. So Her Royal Highness is the Secretary General and member of the Board of Trustees at Alwaleed Philanthropies. Princess Lamia was appointed Secretary General of Alwaleed Philanthropies in 2016. She also holds a number of other roles and leading positions across global organizations. Just to name a few, UN Habitat Regional Goodwill Ambassador for the Arab States. She's a member of the Generation Unlimited Champion Committee with UNICEF, a global champion for gender equality with UN Women, and an honorary advisory member at the 8th Annual GCC Governance HR Summit back in 2020. More recently, as if she wasn't doing enough, she was appointed the CEO of Rotana Media, which if you're in the Arab region, you know the footprint of Rotana Media, which includes Rotana Studios, one of the largest production and distribution companies in the Arab region, as well as Rotana Channels. And she's also a published author, having written a book called Children and Blood, which tackles the incredible complexities around honor killings in the region and the realities of life for women across the Arab region. So it's a lot. She has a lot on her plate. She wears many, many different hats. The hat that she will talk to us about today includes her work as the Secretary General of Alwaleed Philanthropies. So very briefly, over the last 4 decades, Alwaleed Philanthropies has supported and spent more than $4.4 billion on social welfare, and they've initiated more than 1,000 projects in over 190 countries. Notably, this foundation is managed by 10 Saudi females. They reach more than 1 billion beneficiaries around the world. It's regardless of gender, race, or religion. Alwaleed Philanthropies collaborates with a range of philanthropic, governmental, and non-governmental actors to combat poverty, empower women and youth, develop communities. They provide disaster relief. They create cultural understanding through education. And they seek to build bridges for a more compassionate, tolerant, and accepting world. So without going any further myself, I'm going to turn it over to Her Royal Highness. And first of all, just to say hello and welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. And also to let everybody know that Alwaleed Philanthropies is one of the newest members at the AFF network. So it's taken a long time for us to bring them on board, and we're delighted. And so, even more delighted to be having this conversation with Princess Lamia. So I'm going to start off with one quick question as an introduction, and then I'll give you the floor. So based on the topic of today's conversation, you've said that Alwaleed Philanthropies has been engaged in institutionalized philanthropic giving since the establishment of the foundation, which was back in 2010. You've been spearheading numerous initiatives and programs that aim to address entrenched socioeconomic challenges around the world, but also across the region. So I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about what are some of the risks and what are some of the innovative ideas that Alwaleed Philanthropies has adopted over the years, and what are some of the rewards that you've seen or some of the setbacks, some of the failures that go into kind of initiating programs of this scale?
First of all, Naila, thank you very much for the amazing introduction. And thank you very much for having me today. It's such a great honor to be with you today and with all the participants, of course. As you said, the philanthropy is chaired by His Royal Highness Prince Alwaleed bin Talal. Prince Alwaleed bin Talal, he's one of the biggest businessmen around the world. What's very interesting, he refused to be specialized in investment and he refused to be specialized in philanthropy as well. So literally the foundation is doing literally everything from A to Z. Whatever you can imagine, we are working in. From trying to eliminate poverty, to empowerment, to providing vital disaster leave, to actually advocate more for healthier world and healthier environment, to building community and developing community. So we have a range of a very big list of projects. While we're talking now, there is over 65 projects is actually operating in over 170 countries around the world. When we're talking about the certain type of project, I would not say risk, I would say challenges and risk as well. It came to my mind when you start talking about one of our very dear to my heart, to be very honest. So in the foundation, we actually closed over the 1,500 project around the world. But, you know, and everyone working in this field, there's certain project that really touches your heart and you feel it's yours. It's like, this is, if I resign tomorrow, this is my signature, you know? So one of them, when we're talking about risk, back in the days before the vision and before our great young leader, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and طبعا His Majesty King Salman, women rights was a bit of a taboo. It wasn't that easy to be vocal about women rights, legal women rights in Saudi Arabia. So we started from 8 years ago an initiative called Wa'ya, which creating awareness, giving women awareness about their legal rights. I remember, Naila, honestly, when we used to do the workshops, and it wasn't that easy to formulate this gathering. It wasn't that easy. And everyone, even from parents and husband, what are you trying to educate them about? What do you want them to do exactly? And even the community, it was like very odd that you're talking about female women rights, our female legal rights. And we started this initiative with a very small hope or a small goal that we wanted just to go through all around Saudi Arabia, just to tell women that you have the right in the constitution, you do have rights, just you need to read, you need to understand, you need to be able to use your right as a female, as a citizen, as a Saudi citizen. And we started from there, and then it developed to become an initiative that we train lawyers for them to practice law. So we actually trained over 700 lawyers, female lawyers till now. We actually supported women that been facing physical violence or any problems, family problems or family issues. We actually, lately we trained over 100 female lawyers on international law and human rights law. And so every year we're actually upscaling this initiative. And I'm very proud that after all of that, we created an app, which is free app for women. They can enter, they can ask for consultancy from the female lawyers out there, and it's all pro bono and it's all free of charge. And I'm very proud of this initiative. When we talk about innovation and technology, I believe if we didn't tap into this field, so we're not aligned with the era that we're living in. So our latest initiative that we did, it's something called Atli. It's an AI tool that monitor the deforestation and afforestation around the world, and it creates report by itself, and it starts sending those reports for governments, activists, and journalists to create awareness about the deforestation is happening, and the consequences will come after it, whether it's a man-made or like fires from the heat and everything, and deforestation as well. And as you know, we're very proud because, as you know, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced that by 2030 we have to plant over 10 billion trees around Saudi Arabia. Inshallah, we'll be having good ranking, inshallah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, these are two very just incredible initiatives. And I think you're right when you say, okay, not necessarily risks, but some challenges. But in the example that you gave for, around educating women around their legal rights, that there was a risk, right? And this is how you guys kind of managed that risk in a way, which I think is really incredible, because I feel like, in the region in general, we know that we have often faced the misconceptions around what the role of women is in our societies, right? And I think that also comes with a lot of, what's this increasing and rampant Islamophobia, particularly now in more recent years, where there's so much misinformation about what really is the role of women in our societies. And so this brings me back to something I noted in the introduction around your team. And you have a team of 10 women, as you've described to us, that run this organization, that make all this programming, that make all this funding, and all of these projects that you've done over the years. And I just, it's one thing to say this is a female-run entity, and in the nonprofit sector, that's not necessarily a very unique thing. We tend to have more women in the nonprofit sector than men for various reasons. I'm sure there's a ton of research into why that is the case, but I think it's particularly notable in an Arab country and in Saudi Arabia specifically. And I just wonder if, to go away a little bit from the corporate side of this and talk a bit more about the personal side of this. So I know that this is something that is obviously a personal priority for you, but I'm also curious to hear a little bit about the genesis of this type of empowerment in the foundation, coming from its founder, from His Royal Highness Prince Alwaleed. So if you could talk a bit about that, I think that would be so interesting.
Listen, this is a topic that I'm very glad that you opened. Well, it's his vision that women can do anything. And women are capable to run like literally tens of projects by themselves. So in the room now, you can see them. So I have 3 of my staff or my team, Reem, Lukna, and Mawia. So, and me here, we're sitting here now, is 40% of the foundation.
Yeah.
Having this amount of, let's be very realistic about it. The foundation doesn't do anything with our hands. We depend on our partner, and this is also the methodology of His Royal Highness. You don't have to be brilliant in everything. Mm-hmm. What requires from us is strategy, time management, and very meticulous follow-up. Mm-hmm. And of course, he sets the strategy and where we have to focus from the 5 areas of focus that you mentioned in the beginning, mm-hmm. every 3 years. So we have a certain areas that we need to push into it more than the others. And this is, of course, it changes and it varies upon situation as well and upon circumstances around the world. For me, sometimes I feel sorry for them because they literally work 24 hours for sometimes, because as long as you're working in different countries, there is a different time zone. So literally some of the meetings can be at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. And what's beautiful about it now that when you work in philanthropy, I always say that philanthropy is not a job, mm-hmm. it's a passion. Mm-hmm. So when you have the satisfaction, and after that you go on ground and you see the amount of support that we were able, thank God, and we're very, I think we're very lucky to have this opportunity to work on that, to have the power that you can decide that you can help 1 million here, 200,000 there. This is huge when you think about it. This is a huge responsibility. So I believe it's only about how you can actually, first you have to motivate those ladies, and you have to show them, and you have to acknowledge their work. You have to appreciate their time, their effort. All of them are moms, have houses of their own life. But honestly, I would say 100% of my team, when it comes to helping people, they would stay here literally on the office till 12 a.m. And I'm very lucky to have them, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think also you're also providing an opportunity for people that also equally makes them lucky, right? So, people don't stay in work like this if it's not fulfilling. They don't stay in work like this if it's not giving them some kind of reward. Yeah, so that's really incredible. And it's true, yesterday it was
خلينا
funny.
نقول ما شاء الله، خلينا نقول ما شاء الله.
طبعا ما شاء الله مليون مرة طبعا. And it's funny, I was just thinking, like yesterday, it's true when we met your team and you were like, this is it, this is 70% of the 70% of the organization right here. So, and one of the other questions that I really wanted to hear your insights about, particularly because I think, like I said again in the introduction, we hear this term being used a lot around trust-based philanthropy and what that means. I've been in some conversations where people have said, what does that, like, don't use that term. What does it even mean? That's obviously everything around philanthropy is trust-based. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I'm not really sure where I sit on that side of the discussion, but I'm curious when, for you, when you think about the kind of work that you do, when you think about your work to empower women, youth, marginalized communities, and how that's unique in the way that you focus to help people unleash their creativity, to help unleash their innovation and their entrepreneurship potential, which is really huge for this region, particularly when we look at, the Arab region having almost 50% of its population under the age of 25. So there's enormous potential for entrepreneurship and innovative thinking. And I just wonder, for you, if you can talk to us a little bit about what does it mean, first of all, when you say trust-based practices, and what does that look like? What is the role of trust-based giving in creating more enabling environments for social groups, particularly marginalized groups? And what does that look like in terms of the output and how it can unleash their potential?
So let's start from how we choose our partner in the beginning. A trustworthy partner, we have a lot of KPIs that they should check the boxes often. First, they're aligned with our core goal and core spirit of the foundation. Second, the data record, a successful record as a partner. Mm-hmm. Third, now I go blank.
It happens all the time. Take your time. Take your time.
Yeah, so they're aligned, the successful record in a particular specific area that we're tackling a certain problem or initiative, and the impact, how they calculate their impact. This is very important. And of course, this entity should be depending on that. That's alphabetic for us.
Yeah.
Second, when we do any initiative in any country, we have also a KPIs for this project. So we have to have an international entity for their expertise. We have to have a local entity on ground, so we make sure that the work been done with the way that it's suitable for this community. Mm-hmm. And we have to have the government to ensure the sustainability of this project after we are out of it. Mm-hmm. So this is literally, I would say, the recipe for us to say to move forward with any initiative, with any partner, and whether to narrow the gap or support narrowing the gap or closing gaps in some areas.
Mm-hmm. And so in creating those partnerships and in seeking out the different stakeholders that you're going to work with, whether they're partners or beneficiaries or communities or whatever it is, I'm just, the scope of the foundation is so vast. And your goals are so vast. I mean, 1 billion people around the world. We're a world of 8 billion. I mean, that's already like a huge, huge percentage of the world's population. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit to us about your recipe for how do you determine what the priorities are? I mean, we have the climate crisis. We are now currently facing many humanitarian crises and geopolitical crises around the world. We know that we're in a shifting moment in history, right? There's something changing in terms of the dynamic for the global south and how we are emerging a little bit more prominently on the world stage. And I just wonder, like, for a philanthropic organization that also has strategies built into it. So this is not just a charities-based kind of work, right? Which is very important in and of its own,
Absolutely.
right? But still, but you have a different approach. You have a more kind of systematic, structural, strategic approach. So how do you determine what those priorities are? Is it personal? Is it a combination of conversations that you have with your stakeholders, with your team? Like, just talk us through that.
First of all, it's the reports that we receive from the, I would say, the key player in the philanthropic arena. Second, it's His Royal Highness and His Vision. This is an entity, it's individually funded from His Royal Highness. Third, it comes from all, the events, the conferences that you go and you get introduced to people, you understand more about, the problems here and there, and being creative. And this is something, by the way, Naila, this is something, it may be that differentiate Alwaleed Philanthropy from other entity. So Allah yajza kull ahad khair. I'm not saying that this is good or bad or everyone should follow our footsteps. No, I'm just saying what we're doing. As you said, our formula in doing that. So let's say we're doing a project that in favor of empowering women. So we always look to the creative side of the empowerment, meaning that there is no one size fits all. What can be very suitable for women in Saudi Arabia, it will never be very suitable for a woman in India.
Right.
And vice versa. So we actually pay respect to understand more about the community that we were going into, to give them the perfect result. Always His Royal Highness said, I need the return on investment on the human lives. So I'm going to pay $1 there and I'm going to pay $1 here. But you may here put it in education. There you can put it in economical empowerment and training that ends with a job, for example, or a training ends with a small business. You're getting me? So it's that what we're doing.
Right.
And for example, when we work on providing that vital disaster relief, I really appreciate and great job for everyone go to the immediate response, which is perfect. But for us, no, we wait a bit, just for us to understand what's the need, what's the casualty, and how we can provide support, but a sustainable support that will stay and will reflect on those communities.
Right.
So it all depends on what's your goal at the end of the day. Again, because we are an individually funded and led owned entity or organization, this is how we do it for our organization, that it depends on, I would say, donations. It goes with another rule and another, formula, as you said.
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I think, I mean, that's a very key point that you make, particularly around sustainable support post-crisis. And I think, one of the things that I've always looked at and tried to understand a little bit, particularly in our region, and I know that this, it's not necessarily unique, but we tend to have very responsive humanitarian kind of support, but not a lot of forensic accounting of what happens after that support is over and after the urgency is over. And then how do we rebuild communities 10, 20, 30 years into the future? And I think one of the things that Saudi Arabia has done that's very kind of, innovative and creative and also strategic and really smart Other countries around the region have also done that. The Emirates come to mind as well, but is the whole, vision planning, Vision 2030, Vision 2050, and looking forward into, years into the future. And that is, an indication that there's already some thinking in the development sector and the nonprofit sector to think about, okay, we're very good at plugging the gaps and the needs when there's something happens urgently. But then that urgency doesn't go away 10 years later, right? If you're talking about entire communities that have been swept away by, some climate crisis or other, those communities take generations to rebuild. And so while it's really important to have the emergency aid there and the humanitarian aid in the beginning, it's also important to have organizations that are thinking what happens later down the line. So I'm glad to hear you say that that's one of the ways that you also approach this, because I think that's just really strategic and a really, important for this sector. And it's one of the things that also leads me to another question where, it's kind of related to this, but you are one of the few foundations that, because of the flexibility of your funding, and by flexibility, I mean, because it's coming from one source and that source has a vision and that vision is so aligned with you and your team and kind of what's needed around the world, you understand the need to solve structural issues, which you've just talked about, while also looking at being responsive to emergency needs. And I think I'd like to, if you could elaborate just a little bit more on why the foundation doesn't necessarily see this as an either-or decision. So how do you do these two things together? How do you believe that the grant-making practices, or do you believe rather, that the grant-making practices in the region for these two types of causes can happen simultaneously? And do you have any kind of advice for other philanthropies that work in these spaces on how they can build more resilience in their communities? So it's to build a little bit more on what you were just saying.
So let me, yeah. So it depends on the situation and it depends on the location of the crisis. Let's be very honest, some areas, they don't need any extra money. Actually, the funding goes to them. It can not only fix the problem or the crisis, it can build a country.
Right.
If it's used well. And we all know what's happening with what happened with the fund when it was labeled for Syrian refugees. And the amount of, actually it reached, I would believe, $1 trillion, and it wasn't spent right. So here we would rather go to the more sustainable thing that will reflect on communities or areas by itself. Okay. And when you talk about a certain crisis happen in a very small country in Africa or Far East, that no one is really, not saying they don't care, but it's not on the news as the other names. Here we would go as an immediate response. So it's evaluating and understanding more about the need and about the circumstances of the crisis. And who's the main player there? You're getting me? So I'll give you an example. When during COVID, we didn't say a word during COVID, but after 4.5 months, everyone donated for COVID. Everyone supported the accelerators, the vaccines and everything. But no one talked about, or not no one, very few people talked about Africa and talked about the refugee camps. Very few people. So what we decided to do to support those people. In Africa, it wasn't only about providing vaccination. No, we actually supported building small factories for women and youth to produce sanitation, masks, gloves, everything. So we did like 6 factories. We supported providing vaccination for refugee camps. And we did a lot of work on shelters. So it was like a 360 initiative that we worked with literally 8 partners on the ground. On the other hand, some of like what we happened in Nepal, we were on ground 3-4 days after. And actually my team was there.
On the ground, in person.
on the ground with Medical Corp.
Mm.
It differs. It differs on the crisis, it differs on the need, and you have always, and that's why I appreciate our partners, because they're always updating us on the need and the circumstances and how we can enter, and honestly, because of our relation with our partner, we don't have any project, Naila, that it's less than 5 years. This is the minimum. Because if you want really to have an impact on a community, you cannot do it a hit and run and you go.
Yeah,
You cannot.
absolutely.
If you're really serious about having this change and just ensuring that you give the best service for those people, you need to sit with them for a minimum of 5 years. There is
Right.
some project that it goes to 10 to 15 years, actually.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that's incredible, because that's another another kind of conversation that happens very regularly in the sector around the length of funding from organizations for the nonprofit sector. Whether you're working with grassroots organizations or you're working with organizations that are trying to institutionalize their philanthropy, and oftentimes a lot of aid or support or grant making comes in very small tranches. Sometimes it comes with very difficult to meet goals, which set up the organizations to fail if you're looking to help them be self-sustainable. So I think, again, that's another really interesting strategy that you and your team have implemented to ensure that people can at least have a chance. Yeah. And I think, this again segues into another question about the focus on, many philanthropies and philanthropists and grant-making organizations focus on training and the capacity development of youth, of women, of other marginalized populations around socioeconomic empowerment or whatever, education. But very few of them focus on the kind of advocacy that's required to affect policies to change so that these environments can be more enabling for these populations and these demographics. And you talked a little bit about the advocacy that you and your team had done around raising awareness for female legal, women's legal rights in Saudi Arabia. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how do you think other philanthropists, and I'm going to ask you more specifically to focus it on the Arab region, okay? Because we know that in many cases, even the word advocacy can be taken as a little bit, controversially. It's not always encouraged necessarily. And I think that's because, oftentimes people may think that advocacy means that it's a combative, it's an aggressive kind of request or an aggressive kind of confrontation. When in the example that you gave, that's not the case at all, right? I mean, yes, you did have some pushback, you had some challenge, but I would like to hear a bit more about how you overcame those challenges. So when you had husbands and, other males in the society saying, what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do this? How did you overcome that? And what are some of the ways that other philanthropies and philanthropic organizations can overcome the pushback to creating advocacy that helps enable and empower their communities?
I believe when you have a very clear goal, Naila, whether as a person, even in your personal life, when you have a very clear goal, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, then you already in the back of your head, you have the way to go there. You have the plan or the roadmap to go there. A lot of by the way, this is one of the programs or one of the projects that it was a bit challenging. There's a lot was challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a very, very clear end that you know that this is where you want to go, I believe it depends on your strategy. You need to have like a short-term goal, a mid-term goal, and a final goal.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how you reach the end result. Because
Mm-hmm.
what I told you about why it took 8 years to reach, but since the beginning, I know where we're going.
Right.
I know that it was in the plan that I will train lawyers. It was in the plan that we will start communicating with ladies in university. It was in the plan. Every year we have a plan to reach where we are now.
Mm.
So it's all about how you're going to formulate your idea. Who's the stakeholders going to support you to reach where you want? Who's your SOS for
Yeah.
you to stop anywhere?
Right.
You need to know who's with you, who really align with your vision, and you
Right.
get them. One of the most important things that I really want to highlight in philanthropy, we have competition. We compete. Shouldn't be the way with philanthropy. You're not working for yourself. At the end of the day, I'm not working for myself. My success is helping others.
Right. Of course.
So having this alignment and having the buy-in for the stakeholder or the key player for whatever goal that you want to achieve, without being afraid who's going to take the glory.
Right.
This is the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
But a certain very clear, I would say, advice in this. No, it depends where you want to go. But always, you have to have people around you who's aligned. You have to have your SOS numbers and partner. You need to have a very clear vision, very clear strategy, again, and data.
But I'll tell you, actually, that is a very clear piece of advice. That's actually really extremely helpful, because on the one hand, you know, it's very important for people to remember. And this is, I mean, even something I'm just thinking about for myself personally. I'm a person who, when I get very passionate about something and I want to make a change in something, I want it to happen immediately. You know, and I recognize the older I get, you know, the benefit of aging, and hopefully getting a little bit wiser, is that I recognize that there is also value in understanding that these things take time. The shifts, sociological and shifts within societies take time to build up. I mean, look, perfectly honestly, 10 years ago, would we have thought that we would see the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia where it is today, right? Vis-a-vis women's rights, vis-a-vis certain kinds of innovations and developments? Maybe not. Maybe we wouldn't have. But knowing that there are people behind the scenes that are working to advocate for more equity, more justice, more education, whatever it is, that these things take time to build up, and that, you know, having the kind of black and white sort of like, if it doesn't happen tomorrow, then these people are not my allies. I think what you just said is actually a very interesting piece of advice to remember. Not only do you need to build your allies for when things are going well, you need to also have your partners for when you need to reach out to someone and be like, you need to help me on this. This is an SOS situation. So I kind of actually love that. I think that's perfectly the kind of advice that I will, you know, I'll think about for my own, and just to always remember that advocacy that pushes towards, you know, the benefit of many is maybe something that might take some time. So yeah, thank you for that. So you know, this is really actually kind of incredible. We have 23 questions in the question tab, and we have about 22 minutes, 21 minutes now before we end our session. So I want to make sure to get to some of these questions, and some of them are really quite interesting, and I'm going to go ahead and pick a couple. And I'll ask you the first one, which comes from Christine. And Christine says, so she works at COSV in Italy, which is one of AFF's members, actually. So hi, Christine. And she says, I've had the opportunity to live in Saudi Arabia for the past year and a half and have seen the fast pace of change and innovation across the board in every field of work and area of society. I wanted to ask how you think this has affected the philanthropy field and development organizations, and how Saudi Arabia can be an example to other countries in the region in the nonprofit sector. I think that's a great question, actually.
Hope she enjoyed her visit to Saudi Arabia. Of course, it reflects very well on philanthropic entity, with the amount of conferences, people visiting, exchanging knowledge and expertise. There was a lot of changes, and I would, and let me try to say the word right. It's institutionalizing
Right.
the matter.
Right.
So it's in our blood, in our DNA as human, that we serve and we help other. But in the Arab world, it's not an institution way of doing it.
Mhm.
It's whoever can do something, let's do it,
Mhm.
which is good. But being more interacting with the international entities, policies, processes, reporting, metrics, impact. This is all was this words and terminologies we used to hear it. Maybe again we're different because we actually align with a lot of international entities, and this is how we deal with them. But
Mhm.
in Saudi Arabia, there was a very big positive impact since the vision, and since it's very easy for anyone to enter Saudi Arabia, and the amount of conferences and gathering it's in the kingdom.
Mhm.
So yeah, if I answered the question.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely. So this other question is kind of a bit more personal, but Nadia is asking if there are any upcoming projects. So you've talked to us a little bit about some of the projects you've already implemented, but are there any upcoming projects that you're currently really excited about? Or I would add, are there any projects that for you seem to be a very critical priority right now?
Upcoming project, yes, of course. Every year we have an ongoing project that some of them have been there, like for the vaccination, for example.
Mhm.
And this is something that I really, really proud of, that we reach over 700 million kids around the world, alhamdulillah.
Mhm.
What we're looking for moving forward is always in the empowerment side, but again, we are in favor of the economical empowerment. We believe if you're financially empowered, then you're free to choose whether you want to put this in your education, your work, your family, build a house, whatever you want that suits you and suits your situation, you can do it.
Mhm.
What was your question? That's their question.
No, so just just that was it. If are there any projects that are
Okay.
upcoming that you
Okay.
that you're
Okay.
particularly
Okay.
see, this is it. This is it's just a conversation. This is not an
Yeah.
interview. It's just a conversation.
Okay.
So, but a follow-up, I guess, a follow-up, which is also coming from Nadia, another personal question about you personally, but as a philanthropist, what really motivated you specifically to do work in international development, and what are some of the ways that people can support the initiatives that you're working on?
But for me personally, it's the vision of His Royal Highness.
Okay.
What's very interesting that we've been, and what we're very grateful for, that we're empowered by His Royal Highness. He just tell us, you know what, this year you have to concentrate the upcoming 3 years on community development, on women empowerment, and bridging gap between Islam and West, let's say. And this is the budget. He never interfere how we do that. So it's the team, myself, to decide which is best upon, of course, studies, upon data, upon everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great, that's actually kind of unique, huh? Even for an individual philanthropist who has a foundation by themselves. That's a very unique approach. Now, I don't know His Royal Highness. I've never met him. Of course, I know a lot about him. I
Next
know.
time when you come to Riyadh. Next
Yes,
time
for
when you come to
sure,
Riyadh.
for sure.
Inshallah.
Next time at the office, for
Inshallah.
sure.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, that will actually be pretty soon. So we'll definitely let you know. But I know
Sure.
also that he's known for having a little bit of this sort of unique perspective. So apart from the fact that he's obviously a feminist of sorts, but he's also unique as a philanthropist, and this idea that he kind of gives you enough flexibility, but also is ensuring that his vision is being met, which I just think is kind of wonderful. But another question around that, so because you have this kind of flexibility and because you have the ability as a team to decide where to channel your efforts and to channel the funding that's been made available to you, how do you do your follow-up measuring? Like, how do you measure your impact? And I know it's going to vary from different, from one project to the other, because projects are measured differently and impact is measured differently. But if you could give me like one example of something that may not normally be a data-based, scientific data-based measurement, but more of the soft kind of measurement, what would be a strong impact in your mind?
So we have a project which is supporting the International Scouts Foundation. We have been working with the Scouts Foundation for over 12 years now, and we're very proud. We've been one of the main supporters to launch the Girl Scouts in Saudi Arabia for the first time back.
That's amazing.
So when you work with such a partner that all its participants are youth, mainly like 90% are youth, and they're doing everything, they're working in everything, and in literally the 17 SDGs. Actually, there is a project that we one of the biggest supporters for the Scouts, which is the SDGs, to cover the SDGs in different acts and actions from the Scouts. So sometimes we ask our partner who's in the same country to supervise the other project in the same country if my team is not in a regular trips to see and to supervise and to monitor the progress of the program. Sometimes we ask different entities just to help us having this information reporting, but on-ground reporting. So this is another way, beside, of course, the normal systematic reporting method or measuring impact via entities that we're working with as a consultancy. Sometimes some of the partner do this as not as a favor, but as a part of literally what they're doing in the Scouts Foundation.
Right. That's amazing. I actually, just the fact that you're working with the Scouts, I think is incredible, because the Girl Scouts and the International, Scouts Federation or the association is such an impactful youth-based organization around the world. And I just think that's amazing that you were bringing them to Saudi Arabia. That's wonderful. So there's a question from Nora from Greenpeace MENA. And it's actually, I kind of love this question. So she says, you guys are working in climate, and Saudi Arabia was one of the first, if not the first, signatory to the Paris Accords, I believe, in the Arab region. So she's asking, what is the one key piece of advice that you would offer to encourage other philanthropists, I would say specifically in the region, to prioritize donating or making programming and grant making towards climate change? Especially when we consider the fact that there are so many other crises occurring in our region and around the world, obviously, but, disease, wars, education crisis, refugee crisis, all of that. How do we get more philanthropy in the Arab region to at least prioritize climate as one of their strategic priorities? Or do you think that's important? Maybe that's a bigger question.
I don't think there's enough information for entities to understand the crucial need to support this. First, I don't think there is a certain medium that can provide gaps or what's needed in different countries or even in the same country for us to be excited to prioritize the climate, than empowerment, than developing communities, than any other or infrastructure. Yet, if there is clear information about مثلا in the Arab world, of course, one of the things that when you donate to give to provide housing for needy people, this is something wow, jazakallah khair, which is perfect. But how much that entity knows that she can provide a green building instead of the normal building, which is cost less and it helps the environment. So I don't think encouraging people, I would encourage entities to understand what does it mean, something that affect the climate change.
Right.
I think there's no knowledge and there's no information to understand everyone perspective. It's all about oil and gas. It's all about the airplanes. No one knows that. Not no one knows. Very few people know that it may be in the smallest stupid thing that you can change in your life that can change the full world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, you make a really good point because, you know, AFF, we have now really gotten into sort of the climate space and the climate arena. It's one of our strategic objectives. We're working with a climate working group specifically for the MENA region, specifically around MENA-based and, you know, Arab regional-based foundations and organizations to work in climate. And absolutely, you're right. The first thing that we noted when we launched the working group is that we just don't have the adequate information around what does it mean to be a player in the climate, in this challenge, and that people see it as this very daunting, overwhelming thing. But in fact, in many cases, a lot of what our philanthropies are doing can very easily pivot to include climate as one of their objectives. So I love that. So I have another question here, which is a little bit, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask it anyway, but I want you to be able to answer it, even if the answer has to be, this is not something that we can do. Okay. And I'll explain why. So this question comes from Jason. Jason is with the American Friends Service Committee, which is the Quakers organization, and he's based in the US, but they obviously work around the world, and a lot of their focus now is on Gaza and support for Gaza and support for Palestine. And I think, so Jason is asking, Friends is also one of AFF's members, and Jason is asking, what role do you think your foundations or other foundations in the region should play in advocacy for a political situation? Let me not specifically say Gaza, but if we have political situations or geopolitical issues that are happening in our region, do you think that philanthropic foundations and organizations should have a role beyond humanitarian?
Whether humanitarian or political or whatever, in whatever angle that you want to take, the Arab world was until now and will still be the biggest supporter and the biggest advocate for the Palestinian issue. Since 60s and 50s, and since the Israelis went to Palestine, that 48, I believe.
Yep.
And no money, only the Arab world, I believe, who stand for that. What we're doing from a philanthropic perspective, our government set a portal for us to donate. From a philanthropic perspective, us as Alwaleed Philanthropy, we work in Palestine, and now we're working on Palestine in empowering women from an economical way. We have a full center for artisans. We did a lot of education that ends with employment with the EFE.
That's amazing.
We worked a lot with special needs in Palestine. We believe that whether it's Alwaleed Philanthropies or any other entities in the Arab world, whether it's philanthropic or governmental or name it, I think our support, our brother and sister in Palestine, evident long ago. And I think this actually have a very good effect, our solidarity altogether, and how it reflects in the United Nations and its decision this year. So I hope I answered this question.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. And thank you for answering it, because I mean, I know that can sometimes be, but no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And as someone who's half Palestinian, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the question also. Thanks, Jason. So we have about 5 minutes to go. I wanted to ask you, so there's a ton more questions. There's no way that we can get to all of the questions. One thing that a couple of different people have asked, and so I don't want to go through each one of them, but is just to say a few people have asked here if they wanted to contact the foundation, if they wanted to contact Alwaleed Philanthropies for partnership. How do they go about that? Is there an email that they can go to that they can ensure will be read by someone, or like how do we connect them with the organization?
So they can enter our website, which is www.alwaleedphilanthropies.org, and there's a page that you have an inquiry or a question, and you can see all our projects and you can participate. It's all online.
Amazing. So Waleed will put the website in the chat so that everybody can see it. So for everyone who is asking how you can collaborate with Alwaleed Philanthropies, you will get the link to be able to go in.
Just one thing, Naila. Just one thing. Just for everyone too. We don't provide an individual support. We do it via a collaboration with entities and a full program. Just we don't have any misunderstanding.
Yes, no, and I appreciate that very much because we often have to make a similar explanation and clarification that we don't fund individual. So I appreciate that. Yes, thank you. Okay, so the last question, so we can end on a high note, even though honestly this has been, I mean, I could go on, we could just keep going and talking about all these amazing things. And I'm certain that we will have an opportunity to do this again. And I'm hoping that the next time we do it will be in person, and you know, with this wonderful kind of audience with such an engaged population of people who are interested in the work that you're doing. So I'm just going to ask you to tell us, if you had to think about the 3 top critical key things that Arab philanthropy as a sector should aim to, you know, accomplish, to achieve in the next, let's say, 10 years. What do you think are the 3 top priorities that our sector should focus on? And it can be anything from like the smallest to the largest, big dream.
I would say first,
institutionalize
organizations.
Okay.
Having the work under a very clear umbrella, like understanding how to take your foundation, your data, your project to the next level, who to employ, what the capability that you need. Don't over-employ people. Save the money to help others. Second, I would say giving a fair chances for women and men. And I repeat, women and men. If a male is more serious about his career, his life, and he wants to have a different life than what he's having, and he really understands the amount of, I would say, the opportunity by itself, and he's taking this seriously more than the woman, and he have the right to take it, not only because she's a woman, she have the right.
Yeah.
Third, I would say depend on data. Now with this era, everything is being much easier than before. So don't underestimate data, and it's for free, literally. Just you need to know how to read data and how to prompt the machine to get you out the best result. And be passionate about it. Yeah.
I mean, you have literally said every single thing that I hoped you were going to say. Yeah, the institutionalization of the philanthropic sector is so critical. And I think there are different ways to go about that. You know, there's many different forms and models that can take. I think, you know, data, oh my God, it's been my absolute like obsession for the last 10 years, ever since I took this job and ever since I understood the power of data, whether it's data that you can access for free or data that we need to provide as a sector to to our colleagues, to our peers, to make more informed, kind of more, clear-cut decisions, and to make better giving and just to improve our communities and our sector and our region. So I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for your amazing team who are just wonderful. And I can't wait to meet all 10. And yeah, inshallah, I'll see you very soon. And if there's anything you want to say as a closing, please, the floor is yours for the next 30 seconds. Otherwise, we can say goodbye to everyone.
I just want to say thank you very much, and I'm really I'm very grateful for this conversation. I want to say thank you for everyone and for all the participants, and I'll be waiting for you in Riyadh. And thank you very much.
Inshallah,
Stay
thank
safe.
you so much. What an honor. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.